Jessamine Calloway was elbow deep in cardboard boxes at the back of her bookstore when the rain started coming down, like someone upstairs had given up on subtlety and decided to empty the whole sky in one go. It was that kind of September storm that hit central Pennsylvania out of nowhere. The kind where you're unpacking used paperbacks 1 second, and the next you're watching the street outside turn into a river with leaves and trash floating past the window like some kind of suburban rapid situation. She had sent Rosie home with Mrs. Pemberton from upstairs an hour ago. Thank God, because this closing shift was dragging on forever, and the last thing her 7-year-old needed was to be stuck here watching her mom wrestle with inventory and outdated book catalogs until 9 at night. The bookstore, which Jessa had optimistically named Second Chapters 3 years ago when she signed the lease, was barely keeping itself alive these days. She spent most evenings like this one trying to figure out how to stretch another month out of numbers that really did not want to cooperate. The problem with running a used bookstore in a town that was slowly forgetting how to read anything longer than a social media post was that you ended up taking in way more books than you could ever sell just because you could not stand to see somebody's entire lifetime collection end up in a landfill. Jessa had boxes of romance novels from the 70s, textbooks that were 15 editions out of date, and somebody's complete set of encyclopedias from decades ago that she had accepted last week purely because the old man donating them had looked so hopeful. She was pricing a stack of mystery paperbacks with a label gun that kept jamming when she noticed the streetlights outside doing that flickering thing they did right before the power decided to quit. She figured she had better lock up before she ended up stuck here in the dark with nothing but her phone flashlight and a lot of regret. She was at the front door fighting with the keys that always stuck when the humidity got bad when she saw him through the rain-streaked glass. Just some guy walking down the sidewalk in a full suit that was absolutely destroyed by the downpour. No umbrella, no raincoat, nothing. Just walking like he either did not notice he was completely soaked or did not care enough to do anything about it. His briefcase was hanging open at a weird angle, like maybe the latch had busted, and she could see papers inside that were probably getting ruined. And he had this expression on his face that Jessa recognized immediately because she had worn it herself plenty of times. It was the look of someone who had run out of the energy required to care about small things, like staying dry or looking professional, or any of the surface-level stuff that stops mattering when the big stuff is going wrong. 7 years ago, she had had that same look, sitting in her beat-up car with a newborn baby and $17 to her name, wondering if she had made the biggest mistake of her life by leaving, wondering if running away from a man who had never raised a hand to her, but had found 1,000 other ways to make her feel like nothing was actually the brave choice or just the desperate one. Jessa's first instinct was to mind her business because you do not grow up as a single mom in a town like this without learning when to keep your head down and let people handle their own situations. But then she watched him completely miss seeing a curb and stumble hard enough that he almost went down, catching himself at the last second. And something in her chest just made the executive decision before her brain could talk her out of it. She grabbed her keys in her purse and jogged out into the rain, which immediately soaked through her sneakers and made her regret approximately all of her life choices. "Hey, you all right? You need a ride or something?" The guy looked up like he had genuinely forgotten other people existed in the world. Up close, she could see he was probably mid to late 30s, dark hair that was plastered flat against his forehead, and these eyes that looked like they had seen way too much of something she could not quite identify. There was something familiar about him, though she could not place it. Maybe just the universal look of exhaustion that connected everyone who had ever been pushed past their breaking point. He blinked at her a few times like he was trying to process the question. "I'm good, thanks though. I don't live that far from here." But his voice did not match the words at all. It came out flat and mechanical and exhausted, and Jessa had heard that exact tone come out of her own mouth enough times over the years to recognize it for what it was. She pointed at her beat-up Honda parked at the curb, the one with the duct tape holding the back bumper on, and the passenger side mirror that had been dangling by a wire for 3 months. "Dude, you're going to catch pneumonia or whatever. It's literally pouring. Just let me drop you off wherever you're headed. It's seriously not a big deal. I'm already soaked anyway." He did that hesitation thing people do when they are too exhausted to argue, but also too used to handling everything by themselves to accept help easily. She could see him running through the calculation in his head before he finally just gave up and nodded. They both climbed into her car and immediately the windshield fogged up completely from the temperature difference. Jessa cranked the defroster to max while he sat there dripping all over her passenger seat, looking like a lawyer who had just experienced the worst day of his professional life. She pulled out into traffic, which was not much at this hour, and the silence in the car got weird fast. So she tried to break it with something normal. Rough day at the office? It was kind of a dumb question, given that he looked like he had been through an emotional wood chipper, but she did not know what else to lead with. He let out this laugh that did not have any actual humor in it whatsoever. You could definitely say that. His voice had this quality to it, like he was talking from the bottom of a well. Lost a case today that I really thought we had. Now a kid's going back to a situation that's not safe, and there's absolutely nothing I can do about it, because the system's got rules and those rules don't care if they make sense. Jessa felt something twist in her stomach because she had been that kid once. The one stuck in a bad situation while adults argued about paperwork and technicalities. And the fact that this random soaked stranger actually seemed to care about it meant something. She kept her eyes on the road, watching the wipers work overtime against the downpour. That's really heavy. I'm sorry you're dealing with that. What kind of law do you practice? He rubbed both hands over his face like he was trying to physically wipe away the day. Public defender work mostly. Family court, custody cases, dependency hearings, termination of parental rights. All the fun stuff that pays basically nothing and destroys your faith in humanity on a weekly basis. Jessa's hands tightened on the steering wheel without her meaning them to, because those words were hitting way closer to home than this stranger could possibly know. That's actually wild that you mentioned custody cases. She heard herself saying it, which was weird because she did not usually talk about this stuff with people she just met. I've actually been trying to track down a lawyer who helped me about 7 years ago. It was a custody situation, and I was completely broke and desperate, like calling legal aid offices and getting waitlisted for 6 months, kind of desperate. And this guy took my case anyway, even though I couldn't pay him anything up front. She could feel the words coming faster now, like a dam had broken somewhere. His first name was Brennan. I only remember that because my daughter asks about him sometimes. She knows there was this person who helped us when we really needed it, and she wants to know his whole name so she can look him up when she's older. But I only met with him maybe twice before everything happened really fast. I got custody of Rosie, that's my daughter, and then I had to move across the state for a job that could actually support us both. And in all the chaos, I lost his contact information. I've been searching for him on and off for years, but it's hard when you only have a first name and a really fuzzy memory of what he looked like. She felt almost embarrassed admitting all this to a complete stranger, but something about the rain and the darkness and the fact that she would probably never see this guy again made it easier to just say it out loud. The lawyer next to her did not respond the way she expected him to, did not ask follow-up questions or offer to help her search or anything like that. He just kept staring out the window at the rain like his brain was processing her words on about a 15-second delay. That's really nice that you want to say thank you. His voice sounded even more hollow than it had before, like he was physically present, but mentally somewhere else entirely. Jessa glanced over at him. You doing okay over there? Like for real? You seem pretty checked out. He shrugged without looking at her, and she could see his jaw working like he was chewing on words he did not want to say. Honest answer? I'm thinking about quitting. There's this corporate firm that's been trying to recruit me for like 6 months now. Way better salary, actual reasonable hours, cases about contract disputes, and liability insurance instead of kids getting hurt. And I'm just so tired of caring this much about things and then watching it not make any difference at all. Jessa did not really know what to say to that, so she just focused on driving. He gave her turn-by-turn directions to this apartment complex on the east side of town that looked like it had been kinda nice maybe 20 years ago, but had given up somewhere along the way. When she pulled up to the entrance, he grabbed his broken briefcase and turned to look at her, and for the first time since he had gotten in the car, His expression shifted into something that almost resembled a genuine smile. "Thanks for doing this. Seriously, you didn't have to stop for some random wet guy on the sidewalk." Jessa waved him off. "No worries at all. Hope your night gets better, or at least drier." He laughed for real that time, just a quick breath of actual amusement. And then he was out of the car and jogging toward the building entrance, and she sat there watching him disappear into the lobby before she pulled back out onto the street. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder with a text from Rosie asking if she was on her way home yet. Jessa was fumbling with the screen trying to type back a response when she saw it. A little plastic card sitting on the passenger seat right where the soaked lawyer had been, partially hidden under the seatbelt buckle. She picked it up and angled it toward the light from the street lamp outside, and her entire heart just stopped dead in her chest. It was a gym membership card, the cheap kind with your photo laminated on the front. And staring back at her was the face of the guy she had just dropped off, with his full name printed in bold letters right underneath. Brennan Ashworth. Jessa sat there in her idling car with the rain hammering on the roof, staring at that card like it might vanish if she blinked too hard. Brennan Ashworth. The Brennan. The lawyer who had fought for her when she had had absolutely nothing, who had somehow gotten her custody of Rosie when every other attorney in the state had told her the case was too complicated and she could not afford their retainer fees anyway. The man who had sat across from her in a courthouse hallway 7 years ago and promised he would do everything he could, and then he had actually done it, and she had never been able to find him again to say thank you. And she had just spent 20 minutes in a car with him talking about how she had been searching for a lawyer named Brennan, and he had sat right there next to her with zero recognition on his face. No moment of realization, nothing. Because she was probably just one case out of hundreds, maybe thousands. And it had been 7 years and people change, and why would he possibly remember her? Jessa looked at the gym card again, at the address printed on the back, and felt something like electricity running through her hands. She finally had a way to find him. After years of dead-end internet searches and calls to legal aid offices that could not give out information, she had his full name and a location. The man her daughter had been asking about since she was old enough to understand that someone had saved them when they had needed it most. Jessa tucked the card carefully into her wallet, put the car in drive, and pointed it toward home, with her heart pounding so hard she could hear it over the rain. Because tomorrow she was going to track down Brennan Ashworth, and she had absolutely no idea if he was going to remember her at all. Jessa did not sleep that night. Not really. She just kind of lay there staring at her ceiling while her brain ran through about 17 different versions of how the conversation might go when she found Brennan Ashworth again. She had tucked Rosie in around 10 and listened to her daughter ask the same question she had been asking for 3 years now. "Mama, do you think we'll ever find the lawyer man who helped us?" And Jessa had kissed her forehead and said something non-committal because she did not want to get the kids' hopes up in case this whole thing went sideways. But now it was 4 in the morning, and she was wide awake Googling Brennan Ashworth, Public Defender, Pennsylvania on her phone and finding exactly one result that matched. A staff directory for the county courthouse that listed him as working in the family division, which meant she had been living in the same town as him for 3 years and had no idea. She got Rosie off to school the next morning, running on maybe 90 minutes of sleep and 3 cups of coffee that were not doing much except making her hands shake. And by 9:30, she was parked outside the courthouse watching people in suits stream through the front entrance. Jessa had no plan beyond wait until she saw him and then figure it out from there, which was not her finest strategic moment. But she was operating purely on adrenaline and 7 years of wondering what happened to the person who had changed her entire life. She sat there for almost 2 hours, long enough that a security guard came over and asked if she was okay, and she had made up some story about waiting for a friend before he finally wandered off looking suspicious. It was just past 11 when she saw Brennan push through the courthouse doors, looking somehow even more exhausted than he had in the rain. Tie loosened, jacket slung over one shoulder. Jessa was out of her car before she had fully decided it was a good idea. She caught up to him halfway across the parking lot, and her voice came out way louder than she meant it to. "Brennan, hey, wait up a second." He turned around with this confused expression like he was trying to place her face, and she could see the exact moment he recognized her as the woman from the rainstorm. But there was nothing deeper than that. No flash of older memory, just polite acknowledgement. "Oh, hey, did I leave something in your car? I noticed my gym card was missing, but figured I dropped it at home." Jessa pulled the card out of her purse and handed it to him, and their fingers brushed for a second, and she felt ridiculous for noticing. "Yeah, you left this, but that's not why I'm here. I need to talk to you about something, and I know this is going to sound completely out of nowhere." He glanced at his watch, in that way people do when they are trying to be polite but also have somewhere else to be. "I've got about 10 minutes before I need to be back inside. What's going on?" She took a breath that did not do much to steady her nerves. "My name's Jessamine Calloway, but 7 years ago I was Jessamine Thornwood. I dropped my ex's name and took back my maiden name after everything happened, and you were my lawyer. You fought a custody case for me when I had basically nothing and no one else would take it. You got me my daughter." She watched his face carefully, looking for any sign of recognition. But what she saw instead was this kind of horrible blankness, like he was searching his memory and coming up empty. "I'm sorry, I've handled a lot of cases over the years and they kind of blur together. Are you sure it was me?" Jessa felt something sink in her chest because she had built this moment up in her head for so long, and in none of those versions had he just straight up not remembered her at all. "It was definitely you. Rosalind Thornwood. She was just a newborn, barely 3 months old. Her biological father was trying to get custody, even though he'd never even held her. You worked the case pro bono because I was waitressing and living in my car. We met twice, once at a coffee shop and once at the courthouse right before the hearing." Brennan's expression shifted into something that looked almost like pain. "I believe you. I'm not saying you're wrong. I just don't remember. I'm really sorry." He ran a hand through his hair, and she could see how much this was bothering him. "I've probably worked 800 cases in the last 7 years. Maybe more. Family court is just nonstop. And after a while, the faces and names start to blend. It's not that you weren't important. It's just—" He trailed off, and Jessa could hear the exhaustion in every word. She felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. "It's fine. I get it. You were doing your job. And I was just another case. But for me, it was everything. You gave me my daughter. You gave me a future. I've been searching for you for 7 years because Rosie asked about you, and I wanted to say thank you and introduce you to her so she could see that the person who saved us was real." He looked genuinely distressed now, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Look, I'm really glad the case worked out for you. That's amazing. But I'm not that person anymore. I don't save people. Most days I can't even save myself from drowning in paperwork and losing cases I should win." Jessa felt frustration rising up to replace the disappointment. "What are you talking about? You literally saved us. How are you not that person?" Brennan's jaw tightened, and she could see him deciding whether or not to say something real. "Because I'm burned out. Completely toasted. I lose more cases than I win these days. And every single one takes a piece of me I don't get back. I'm taking a corporate job in Ohio next month and leaving all of this behind because I can't keep doing it." The words came out harsh and final, and Jessa just stared at him. "You're quitting?" "Yeah, I'm quitting. I'm going to go push paper for an insurance company and make actual money and not go home every night feeling like I failed someone. Is that what you want to hear?" Jessa felt anger flash through her, the kind she usually kept buried. "No. What I want is for you to meet my daughter and let her thank you for giving her a stable life. She's 7 years old, and she's asked about you since she was old enough to understand what you did. But if you're too wrapped up in your own burnout to spend 1 hour seeing that your work actually mattered, then fine. Forget it." She turned to walk away and made it maybe 5 steps before she heard him call after her. "Wait, hold on. That's not fair." Jessa spun back around. "What's not fair is that you don't remember us. What's not fair is that I've spent 7 years trying to find you so I could tell you that you changed our entire lives. And you're standing here telling me it doesn't matter because you're tired." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she hated that she was getting emotional in a courthouse parking lot in front of someone who clearly did not want to be there. Brennan looked like he had been punched. "I didn't say it doesn't matter. I said I don't remember. Those are different things, and yeah, I'm tired. I'm so tired I can barely function. But that doesn't mean I don't care. They stood there in tense silence for a minute, just staring at each other, while people walked past them toward the courthouse entrance. Finally, Brennan's shoulders dropped. What do you want from me? You want me to pretend I remember you? I can't do that. It wouldn't be honest. Jessa wiped at her eyes roughly. I want you to meet Rosie, just once. Let her tell you what you did for us. Let her show you the book report she wrote about you in second grade. And then if you still want to run off to Ohio and push paper, you can do that. But at least you'll know that one time you actually made a difference. He looked torn, like he was arguing with himself internally, and she pressed the advantage. You told me in the car yesterday that you're tired of caring and watching it not matter. Well, here's your proof that it mattered. I'm standing right in front of you. Rosie exists because you fought for us. Just give me 1 hour. Brennan was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was rough. 1 hour. That's it. And then I need you to let this go. Because I can't be someone's hero. I'm barely holding it together as it is. Jessa nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and pulled out her phone. The bookstore. Second chapters on Main Street. Tomorrow after you're done with work. I'll have Rosie there. He agreed with a tight nod and walked back toward the courthouse, and Jessa stood there in the parking lot feeling like she had just fought a battle she was not sure she had won. Brennan showed up at second chapters the next evening at 6:15, looking like he would rather be literally anywhere else. Jessa watched him through the front window as he stood outside for a solid 30 seconds, clearly debating whether to just bail on the whole thing. Rosie had been vibrating with nervous energy since she got home from school, changing her outfit 3 times and organizing the things she wanted to show him into neat piles on the reading table in the corner. And now she was sitting on the floor by the children's section, pretending to read but actually watching the door like a hawk. Jessa unlocked it before Brennan could change his mind and waved him inside. He walked in with his hands shoved deep in his pockets and his shoulders up around his ears, like he was bracing for something painful. Rosie looked up from her book and went completely still. Jessa could see her daughter's brain working overtime, trying to match the real person in front of her with the image she had built up over years of stories. Brennan seemed just as uncomfortable, giving this awkward half wave that would have been funny if the whole situation was not so loaded with expectation and hope and the weight of something he could not even remember. Jessa stepped in before the silence got too weird. Brennan, this is Rosie. Rosie, this is Mr. Ashworth, the lawyer I told you about. Rosie stood up slowly, clutching a purple folder to her chest, and her voice came out smaller than usual. Hi, thank you for coming. I made some stuff to show you, if that's okay. Brennan's expression softened just a fraction, and he nodded, following Rosie over to the table where she had set everything up with the kind of precision only a 7-year-old on a mission could manage. There were drawings spread out in a careful line. Jessa hung back by the counter, giving them space but close enough to hear everything. Rosie picked up the first drawing, which was done in crayon on construction paper that had definitely seen better days. I made this when I was 4. Mama told me about you and I wanted to draw what you looked like. She said you had dark hair and you wore a tie and you smiled at her when she was really scared. So I drew that. The picture was classic little kid art, a stick figure with a triangle body and a huge smile. Brennan took it with hands that Jessa noticed were shaking slightly. This is really good. His voice had lost some of that defensive edge from yesterday. Rosie beamed and grabbed another drawing, this one more detailed, clearly from when she was older. This one's from when I was 5. I'm better at drawing now. See, I gave you a briefcase because lawyers carry those. And I put you in a courthouse because that's where Mama said you helped us. Brennan studied the drawing like it was evidence in a case, really looking at it. Jessa saw his throat work as he swallowed hard. Rosie was not done. She pulled out a whole stack of pictures, years of artwork dedicated to a person she had never met. And with each one, she explained what she had been thinking when she drew it, what part of the story her mom had told her that inspired it, and Jessa watched Brennan's face gradually crack open. I made this one last year because I wanted to practice faces. And this one I drew after Mama told me you worked for free because helping people was more important than money. I thought that was really cool. Rosie looked up at him with absolute sincerity. I've been drawing pictures of you since I was 4. Mama said you were a hero, and heroes are important. I wanted to remember you, even though I never met you. Brennan set the drawings down carefully and his voice came out rough. You've been drawing pictures of me since you were 4? Rosie nodded enthusiastically. That's why I drew all the pictures, so I'd have a place to keep you safe until we found each other. Brennan looked at Jessa over Rosie's head, and she could see something breaking behind his eyes. Some wall he had built up crumbling in real time. Rosie pulled out the purple folder. I also wrote this for school. We had to do a report on someone who inspired us, and I picked you. My teacher gave me an A+, and she put it on the bulletin board for parent night. She handed him the folder, and he opened it to find 3 handwritten pages in careful second-grade cursive. With the title My Hero, Mr. Brennan decorated with stars and hearts. Brennan started reading, and Jessa could see his lips moving slightly as he processed the words. She knew what it said because she had helped Rosie write it, had sat at their kitchen table while her daughter dictated the story of how a lawyer she had never met had fought for her before she was old enough to remember. The report talked about how Mr. Brennan had made it possible for Rosie to have a home and a mom who loved her, how he had worked for free because helping people was more important than money, how Rosie wanted to be just like him when she grew up and make sure other kids did not have to be scared. Jessa watched Brennan's shoulders start to shake about halfway through the second page, watched him try to hold it together and fail. And then he just put his face in his hands and cried right there at the table in her bookstore. Rosie looked panicked and turned to Jessa with wide eyes. Jessa came over and put a hand on her daughter's shoulder. It's okay, baby. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're happy or when they remember important things. Brennan pulled himself together enough to look at Rosie through red-rimmed eyes. I'm sorry. I'm not sad, I promise. I just forgot why I do this job, why I became a lawyer in the first place. And you reminded me. Rosie's face cleared, and she did something that absolutely destroyed what was left of Brennan's composure. She walked over and hugged him, just wrapped her skinny 7-year-old arms around his shoulders and squeezed. It's okay to forget things. Our brains get full sometimes. But now you remember, right? Brennan hugged her back and nodded against her shoulder. The bell above the door chimed, and they all looked up. A man walked in, tall, expensive suit, the kind of calculated smile that made Jessa's blood run cold before her brain even caught up with why. Later, she would learn he had had someone watching her for months, waiting for the moment she finally found the lawyer who had beaten him once before. She knew that face, had spent years trying to forget it. Garrett Thornwood, Rosie's biological father, the man who had signed away his parental rights 7 years ago, without ever meeting his daughter. The man Jessa had run from when Rosie was still a newborn, and now he was standing in her bookstore like he owned the place. Jessamine, it's been a long time. Jessa was on her feet before she knew it, positioning herself between Garrett and the children's section, where Rosie had been happily unaware of what was happening. What are you doing here? Garrett's smile did not waver. I heard you opened a bookstore. Charming little place. Very you. His eyes slid to Brennan, who had stood up with tension radiating from every line of his body. And this is none of your business. Jessa's voice came out sharper than she intended. You need to leave. Now, is that any way to greet an old friend? Garrett took a step closer, and Jessa felt her stomach turn. I'm actually here because I have some news. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, about family, about what matters, and I've decided I want to be part of my daughter's life. The words hit Jessa like a physical blow. She's not your daughter. You signed away your rights. You've never even met her. People change. Garrett's voice was smooth, practiced. I've changed. I'm filing for joint custody. My lawyers will be in touch. Brennan stepped forward. On what grounds? You haven't paid child support in 7 years. You've had no contact. You voluntarily terminated your parental rights. Garrett's eyes narrowed slightly as he took in Brennan's rumpled suit and courthouse badge still clipped to his pocket. Brennan Ashworth. I thought you looked familiar. We were at the same firm, weren't we? Before you decided to slum it in family court. Something flickered across Brennan's face. Recognition. Garrett Thornwood. You're that Thornwood? The very same. Garrett's smile was all teeth. I hear you're planning to leave for Ohio. Smart move. Family court cases around here can get complicated. The threat was barely veiled, and Jessa felt her hands start to shake. Garrett turned back to her, dropping his voice to something that might have sounded concerned to anyone who did not know him. I'll be in touch, Jessamine. We have a lot to discuss about our daughter. He left without another word, the door swinging shut behind him with a cheerful chime that felt obscene given what had just happened. Jessa stood frozen, her mind racing through every nightmare scenario she had ever imagined. Jessa! Brennan's voice cut through the panic. Jessa, look at me! She turned, and he was closer than she expected, his expression completely different from anything she had seen before. The exhaustion was still there, but underneath it was something harder, something like determination. That man. You ran from him 7 years ago? She nodded, not trusting her voice. And I was the one who helped you get custody? Another nod. Brennan was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working like he was making calculations she could not see. He said he's filing for joint custody. Do you have a lawyer? I can't afford. She stopped, hating how weak the word sounded. The bookstore barely breaks even. I've been putting everything I have into keeping it open. Then I'll do it. Jessa stared at him. What? I'll be your lawyer. Pro bono. Again. He ran a hand through his hair. I don't remember the first case, but I'm going to remember this one. And I'm going to make sure he doesn't get anywhere near your daughter. But Ohio can wait. He pulled out his phone, already typing something. I've got 3 weeks before I'm supposed to start. That's enough time to at least get the preliminary motions filed and establish a defense strategy. Why? The question came out before she could stop it. You don't even know us. You don't remember us. Brennan looked at her, and there was something raw in his expression. Because a 7-year-old girl just showed me a stack of drawings and a book report and reminded me why I started doing this in the first place. Because you stopped in the rain for a stranger when you didn't have to. And because I spent the last year telling myself that nothing I do matters, and you just proved me wrong. He glanced toward the children's section, where Rosie had apparently fallen asleep with a picture book open on her chest. That kid in there thinks I'm a hero. I'm not, but maybe I can try to be the person she thinks I am. Just this once. The morning after Garrett's visit, Jessa found Rosie sitting at the kitchen table, unusually quiet. Mama, is the man from yesterday going to take me away? Jessa's heart cracked. She sat down and pulled her daughter close. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that doesn't happen, baby. Rosie was quiet for a moment, then looked up with those 2 wise eyes. Mr. Brennan cried when he read my book report. Real tears. I know, sweetheart. People who cry because of good things aren't the kind of people who leave. Rosie's voice was certain. They're the kind of people who stay. He's going to help us, isn't he? Jessa held her daughter tighter, hoping with everything she had that Rosie was right. That afternoon, Brennan called to tell her he had turned down the Ohio job. Indefinitely. I talked to them this morning, told them something came up. Brennan, you can't. I already did. His voice was firm. Now tell me everything. From the beginning. I need to know what we're dealing with. The next 3 weeks were a blur of legal documents and late-night strategy sessions and coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Brennan had set up a corner of the bookstore as a makeshift office, surrounded by case files and legal precedents and the ever-present stack of Rosie's drawings that he refused to move. It was 2 weeks into their preparation when Brennan found it. He had been digging through old case files, looking for anything that might help when he stumbled across a name he recognized. A paralegal who had assisted Jessa with her original paperwork 7 years ago. A paralegal who, according to bar records, had never actually been licensed. He followed the thread. Bank records, employment history, a single wire transfer from a shell company that traced back to Thornwood Holdings. Brennan sat in the back of the bookstore at 2 in the morning, staring at his laptop screen, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Jessa, she looked up from the stack of documents she had been organizing. I know why I won your case 7 years ago. She came closer, saw his expression, and felt something cold settle in her stomach. What do you mean? Someone sabotaged your paperwork. Deliberately. The forms were filled out wrong. The dates were off. There were errors that should have gotten the case thrown out. His voice was rough. I fixed them. I thought you just made mistakes because you were stressed in doing it yourself. But you didn't make those mistakes, did you? Jessa shook her head slowly. A woman helped me. She said she was from legal aid. She wasn't. Brennan turned the laptop to show her. She was paid by Garrett. He wanted you to lose. He wanted Rosie from the beginning, not because he cared about her, but because he knew someday he'd need her. A daughter he could trot out for photo ops. A family he could claim when it was politically convenient. Jessa's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the nearest chair. He's been planning this for 7 years? Longer, probably. He signed away his rights because it was easier at the time, but he made sure there was a backup plan, a way to get her back when he needed her. The revelation made Jessa want to scream, to break something, to drive to Garrett's expensive house and burn it to the ground. Instead, she looked at Brennan with fire in her eyes. Can we use this? He smiled, and there was nothing soft about it. We can destroy him with this. Through it all, something else was happening. Something neither of them talked about, but both of them felt. It started small. The way Brennan brought her coffee, exactly how she liked it without ever asking. 2 sugars, splash of cream, because he had been paying attention. The way she started saving the good pastries from the bakery next door for his late-night visits. Then it grew. The conversations that started about case strategy and wandered into childhood memories, failed relationships, dreams they had given up on and dreams they were afraid to admit they still had. The comfortable silences that felt more intimate than words. One night the power went out during a storm. They worked by candlelight, heads bent close together over documents, and when Jessa looked up, Brennan was watching her with an expression that made her forget how to breathe. He leaned in. She leaned in. And then Rosie's voice came from the stairs. Why are all the lights off? Is it a blackout? Can we have a sleepover in the living room? They jumped apart like teenagers caught by their parents. But something had shifted. Something that could not be unshifted. Rosie adored him. She had added him to her collection of drawings, a new picture labeled, My Real Hero, that showed 3 stick figures holding hands. A tall one with dark hair, a medium one with curly hair, and a small one with a gap-toothed smile. One evening after the kids had gone home from Thursday reading hour, and Rosie was helping shelve books, she tugged on Brennan's sleeve. Mr. Brennan. Yeah, Rosie. You know what I think a hero is? He crouched down to her level. What's that? A hero isn't the strongest person. Her face was serious, like she was imparting great wisdom. A hero is someone who's scared but does the right thing anyway. You're scared, I can tell, but you're still here. That makes you a hero. Brennan's eyes went bright, and he had to look away for a moment. You know what, Rosie? You might be the smartest person I've ever met. She grinned. I know. 3 days before the hearing, Garrett made his move. Jessa was closing up the bookstore when she found the envelope slipped under the door. No stamp, no return address. Just her name in typed letters. Inside was a photograph of Rosie walking home from school. And a note, drop the case, take the joint custody deal. Or the next photograph won't be so innocent. Jessa's hands shook so badly she could barely hold the paper. She called Brennan. He was there in 15 minutes, his face going pale when he saw the photo. He's threatening my daughter. He's actually threatening a 7-year-old. This is good. Jessa stared at him like he had lost his mind. How is this good? Because it's evidence. Witness intimidation, harassment, maybe even stalking. Brennan was already photographing everything, documenting the envelope, the note, the timestamp. He's desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, and he just made a big one. He looked at her, and there was something fierce in his expression. I'm not going to let anything happen to Rosie, or to you, I promise. It was the first time he had made a promise like that. The first time he had said I instead of we. And despite everything, despite the fear clawing at her chest, Jessa believed him. The custody hearing arrived on a gray October morning. Judge Cordelia Fairfax presided. She was known for being fair but ruthless when it came to protecting children. Exactly the kind of judge they needed. Garrett's lawyers went first. They painted a picture of a reformed man, a successful attorney who had matured and grown and now wanted to be part of his daughter's life. They talked about his stable home, his new marriage, his financial resources. They implied that Jessa was struggling, that her bookstore was failing, that Rosie would have better opportunities with joint custody. Then it was Brennan's turn. He was methodical, devastating. He presented 7 years of zero contact, zero child support, zero birthday cards or Christmas presents, or even a single phone call. He showed emails where Garrett discussed Rosie as a political necessity and a family image asset. He revealed the sabotage from 7 years ago, the fake paralegal, the deliberately wrong paperwork. Then he presented the photograph, the threatening note, the evidence of witness intimidation. Garrett's face went from confident to pale as the evidence mounted. But the moment that changed everything came when Brennan asked permission for Rosie to address the court. She walked to the witness stand clutching her purple folder, looking impossibly small but somehow completely unafraid. "Miss Calloway," Judge Fairfax said gently, "do you understand why we're here today?" Rosie nodded. "A man says he wants to be my dad." "That's right. Do you have something you'd like to tell the court?" Rosie opened her folder and pulled out a worn piece of paper. "This is a picture I drew when I was 4. It's Mr. Brennan. I didn't know what he looked like, so I just drew someone brave. Someone who fights for people who can't fight for themselves." She held it up for the court to see. A stick figure with a triangle body and a huge smile, standing in front of a building labeled Courthouse in wobbly letters. "I've been drawing pictures of him for 3 years, because Mama said heroes are real, and I wanted to remember him even though I'd never met him." Her voice got stronger. "And then I did meet him, and he was real, and he came back to help us again, even though he didn't remember us, because that's what real heroes do. They don't help you because they remember you. They help you because it's the right thing to do." She looked directly at Garrett. "I don't know you. You say you're my father, but a father isn't just someone who shares your DNA." Her voice was clear and steady in a way that made Jess's heart ache with pride. "A father is the person who teaches you to ride a bike, the person who reads you stories when you're scared, the person who shows up." She turned back to the judge. "That man never showed up. Not once. Not ever. But Mr. Brennan did. He saved me and my mama 7 years ago, and he came back to save us again. He didn't even remember us, but he stayed anyway. Because that's what real heroes do." She pointed at Garrett. "He's not my father. He's just a stranger who wants something from me, and I don't want to know him. Because people who only show up when they need something aren't family. They're just using you." The courtroom was silent. Judge Fairfax looked at Rosie for a long moment, then turned her gaze to Garrett, whose expensive lawyers were suddenly very interested in their notes. "Mr. Thornwood, in my years on this bench, I have rarely heard a child articulate so clearly what family truly means. I suggest you learn from her." She straightened her papers. "Petition for joint custody is denied. Full custody remains with the mother. Furthermore, I am referring the evidence of case tampering and witness intimidation to the appropriate authorities for investigation." She looked at Garrett one final time. "I hope for your sake that your political ambitions can survive what's coming. Court is adjourned." The aftermath was swift. The investigation into Garrett's sabotage and intimidation made the news. His Senate campaign collapsed overnight. His wife filed for divorce. Everything he had built on manipulation and lies crumbled around him. But for Jessa and Rosie and Brennan, a different kind of building was happening. The bookstore started doing better. Word had spread about what happened, and people wanted to support the single mom who had fought back. Brennan officially declined the Ohio job permanently and started volunteering at the legal aid office 1 day a week, handling pro bono family cases. Thursday reading nights became a fixture. So did Sunday dinners at Jess's apartment. And somewhere in between, without either of them quite planning it, a family started to form. It was a Tuesday evening, 3 months after the trial, when Brennan found Jessa alone in the bookstore after closing. "Can I tell you something?" She looked up from the inventory she was pretending to do. "Always." He crossed the room and stood in front of her, closer than he had ever allowed himself to be before. "7 years ago, I helped you because it was my job. I don't remember it. I don't remember you. I've processed so many cases that they all blurred together, and I forgot that every file was a real person with a real life. Jessa started to speak, but he held up a hand. Let me finish. I don't remember you from 7 years ago, but I will never forget you from now. Every late night working on the case, every cup of terrible coffee, every time Rosie added another drawing to her collection. Every moment of the last 3 months is burned into my brain because it's the first time in years that I've felt like I was actually alive. His voice was rough. I love you, Jessa, not because you reminded me of who I used to be, because you and Rosie showed me who I want to become. And I know I'm not good at this. I'm awkward, and I work too much, and I cry at children's book reports. But if you'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my life trying to be the person that little girl thinks I am. Jessa reached up and touched his face. I searched for you for 7 years to say thank you. I never expected to find this. She kissed him then, soft and sure, and when they broke apart, she was smiling through tears. I love you too, Brennan. You saved us twice. Once because it was your job, and once because you chose to stay. The second one meant more. 1 year later, the bookstore was crowded with children, all gathered for Thursday reading night. Brennan sat in the big armchair by the window, doing voices for a picture book about a dragon who was afraid of his own fire. Jessa stood behind the counter, watching him with a diamond ring on her finger and a hand resting on a stomach that was just starting to show. Rosie, now 8 years old, was helping a younger girl pick out a book, explaining with great authority which ones had the best pictures. Outside, rain had started to fall, the same kind of sudden September storm that had brought them all together. Rosie noticed and ran to the window, pressing her nose against the glass. Mama, it's raining, like the night you found Dad. The word still made Brennan's eyes go bright every time she said it. Jessa came over and put her arm around her daughter. So it is. Rosie was quiet for a moment, watching the water stream down the glass. Mama, do you think the rain knew? Like, was it supposed to happen? Jessa thought about gym cards and parking lots, and a man who had looked like he was drowning on dry land. What do you think, sweetheart? Rosie tilted her head, considering. I think the rain was just rain, but we were brave enough to stop and help a stranger. That's the part that matters. Brennan had come up behind them, and he wrapped his arms around both of them. You know what, Rosie? You're absolutely right. The rain wasn't special, but what we chose to do in the rain, that's what changed everything. Rosie grinned up at him. I know. I'm always right. They all laughed, and Jessa leaned into Brennan's shoulder, watching the storm through the window of the bookstore she had named for second chances. Sometimes storms do not come to destroy. They come to guide you home. And sometimes the people we save end up saving us right back, reminding us of who we forgot we were. Jessa had searched for 7 years to say thank you to a stranger. She found a family instead. Brennan had forgotten why he fought. A child with a purple folder reminded him. And Rosie, the little girl who always believed heroes were real, finally had someone to call Dad. Because sometimes the second chapter is even better than the first. You just have to be brave enough to turn the page.